I never thought a game tournament would end up being the place where I met someone who actually made my heart skip a beat instead of just my score. Seriously, I signed up mostly because my friends dared me to prove I wasn't the worst at this new card game everyone's been obsessed with. Plus, it was a way to spend a Saturday that didn't involve endless scrolling through my phone or binging shows alone. What I didn't expect was to go head-to-head with this guy who didn't just wipe the floor with me, but somehow managed to flirt between rounds like it was part of his game strategy. So picture this. The local comic book shop was hosting this tournament, and the place was buzzing with all sorts of people. Some hardcore competitors, some casual fans just there for the vibe. I arrived early, clutching my deck of cards like it was some precious artifact, nervously watching others shuffle and strategize. I wasn't exactly a newbie, but I definitely wasn't a pro. Mostly, I was there hoping to make it past the first round without embarrassing myself in front of this small but intense crowd. Then he appeared, tall, with this effortless confidence that made it hard to look anywhere else. He had these sharp eyes that seemed to size me up right from the start, and a smile that was half amused, half challenging. He wore a simple black hoodie and jeans, but somehow he looked like he belonged in a movie scene about underground gaming legends or something. When we got paired up, my stomach did this weird flip-flop. And not just because I was nervous about losing. The first round was brutal. He made moves I didn't see coming, and I was scrambling just to keep up. But every time we took a short break between matches, he'd lean over and make some sly comment. Nothing cheesy, just enough to make me smile and forget how much I was losing. It was like he wasn't just playing against me, but actually interested in me, and that completely threw me off my game. Honestly, I wasn't sure if he was messing with me or actually flirting, but either way, I was hooked. By the time our round ended, it wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about figuring out what this guy's deal was. And trust me, in a room full of gamers glued to their screens and scoreboards, that felt like the most exciting thing happening all day. That's where things stood when the second round was about to start, and I realized this tournament was turning into one of the most unexpected days of my life. Little did I know, the guy who was supposed to be just my opponent was about to become way more than that. The second round started before I could even catch my breath. The organizer called out the matchups, and, no surprise, I was paired up with the same guy. I guess luck, or fate, was having a laugh at my expense. When he sat down across from me, that grin was still there, all casual like nothing was at stake. But beneath that easy smile, I could tell he was sizing me up in a different way now, like maybe he thought I was worth paying attention to. "You ready to get crushed again?" he teased, eyes sparkling a little more than before. I rolled my eyes but couldn't help the smile tugging at my lips. "I might surprise you, or at least I'll make it interesting." He raised an eyebrow. I like that attitude. We started playing again, and this time I was a little more focused. Not because I was super competitive or anything, but because I suddenly wanted to impress him. Yeah, that sounds lame, but it's true. Every move I made felt like I was sending some kind of signal. Like I was trying to say, hey, I'm not just some random guy you beat for fun. Between rounds, the usual chatter in the room faded a bit for me. Instead, I found myself looking forward to those moments where he'd lean in, like he was letting me in on a secret nobody else knew. "You're better than you look," he said quietly after a particularly close round. I was expecting an easy win. I laughed, feeling a flush creeping up my neck. "Yeah? Well, I don't like making it too easy for my opponents." He smirked. "Good. I hate boring games." There was something magnetic about the way he said that, like he wasn't just talking about the cards, but maybe life in general. The way his eyes locked on mine made it hard to focus. Honestly, I was getting distracted in the best way possible. As the tournament moved on, I noticed he wasn't just flirting randomly. He seemed genuinely interested, asking about my strategy, laughing at my jokes, teasing me about my nervous habits, like the way I tapped my fingers when I was thinking. I told him it was a bad habit I was trying to break, and he nodded like he understood more than I expected. At one point, during a longer break, he sat back with a grin and said, "You know, this isn't exactly the usual place to meet someone you want to hang out with after the tournament." I shook my head. "Yeah, I thought so too, but here we are." He laughed softly. "So what's your name, anyway? I realize I've been flirting without the basics." "Jake," I said. "Jake," he repeated thoughtfully. "I'm Lucas. Lucas. The name suited him. Simple, but with a quiet strength to it. The tension between us grew with every exchanged glance and half-smile. I caught myself stealing a few moments just to watch him as he played against other competitors. The way he concentrated, the slight curl of his lips when he won a tricky match, it all felt strangely familiar, like I was getting glimpses of someone who wasn't just a competitor, but maybe someone I'd been waiting to meet without even knowing it. There was a moment after the third round where Lucas reached over and nudged my arm lightly, saying, "If you're up for it, I know a great coffee place nearby. Maybe we could talk about strategies over a real deck sometime." I almost choked on my breath because, honestly, I wasn't expecting an invite. I was about to say something clever or smooth, but all I managed was a stunned, "Yeah, I'd like that." The rest of the tournament blurred a bit after that. I lost some matches, won a few, but none of it really mattered. Lucas and I kept stealing those little moments between rounds, laughing about ridiculous plays, sharing stories about how we got into the game, and just connecting. It felt easy and exciting at the same time, like finding a familiar song you forgot you loved. When the final round wrapped up and the winner was announced, spoiler, it wasn't me, Lucas walked over with that grin that now felt like it belonged just to me. "Good game," he said. "Same time next week?" I nodded, heart racing. "Definitely." As we packed up our decks, I realized something. I came to the tournament thinking I'd just have a fun day playing cards. Instead, I walked away with a story I couldn't wait to tell. And maybe, just maybe, something worth exploring beyond the game table. And honestly, that felt like the best win of all. We ended up walking out of the comic shop together, the evening air cooler than I expected for early spring. Lucas glanced over, that same easy grin still playing on his lips, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this, comfortable around someone I barely knew. "So, coffee?" he repeated, like he wanted to make sure I wasn't backing out. "Yeah, coffee sounds good," I said, my voice a little too eager even for me. We took a couple of blocks down the street, the city sounds fading into a low hum behind us. The coffee place Lucas picked was small, with warm lights and a bunch of mismatched chairs that made it feel like a living room more than a cafe. We snagged a corner table, and for the first time since the tournament started, I felt like I could just be myself without worrying about cards or scores. Lucas ordered a black coffee, and I went with a chai latte, mostly because I'm terrible at making decisions under pressure. We settled into a rhythm that felt natural, talking about everything from our favorite games to random stories about our week. The way he listened made me realize how rare it was to find someone who actually paid attention when you talked. "So," he said, stirring his coffee like he was thinking it through, "what got you into this game? I mean, you're clearly not some casual player." I shrugged, smiling. Honestly, it started as a way to hang out with some friends. I'm not great at social stuff, so this was like a way to break the ice. But then I got hooked on the strategy side. It's like chess with a twist, you know? He nodded. I get that. For me, it was more about the community at first. But then the competition just pulled me in. There was a pause, and I felt that pull again, the one that made me want to say something more but also scared me a bit. Instead, I went for safer ground. "So, competition, huh? You're pretty good at it." Lucas chuckled. "Thanks. I guess I've had a lot of practice. But it's more fun when the other player isn't just good at the game, but also kind of charming." My heart skipped again. "You're really laying it on thick." "Maybe," he said, eyes glinting. "But I mean it." We talked for what felt like hours, the cafe slowly emptying around us. At some point, the conversation shifted from games to more personal stuff. Lucas told me about his job as a graphic designer and how he sometimes felt like his creative side didn't get enough airtime. I shared a bit about my work, boring office stuff mostly, and how I was always looking for ways to shake things up. It surprised me how easy it was to open up to him, like the game tournament had cracked open a door I didn't know I wanted to walk through. Eventually, the topic turned back to the game, and Lucas leaned forward with that teasing grin again. "You know, I'm thinking we should team up for the next tournament. Doubles." My eyes widened. "Doubles? I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of pressure." "Come on," he said, nudging my shoulder playfully. "It'll be fun. Besides, I think we'd make a great team." I laughed, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the chai latte. All right, you talked me into it. We exchanged numbers before leaving the cafe, and I caught myself glancing at my phone more than once on the walk home, just to make sure his name was still there. That night, I kept replaying the day in my head. The game, the flirting, the coffee, the way Lucas made me feel seen in a way I hadn't expected. It was like I'd stepped into a new chapter without even realizing it. The next week, when we met up again for the doubles tournament, there was a comfortable familiarity between us that made the whole experience even better. We communicated without words sometimes. Just a glance or a quick smile that said, "I've got your back." And somewhere between the shuffling of cards and the shared laughter, I realized this wasn't just a game anymore. It was the start of something I didn't want to end. That doubles tournament was something else. Walking into the comic shop again felt different this time, not just because I was teaming up with Lucas, but because I actually had something to look forward to. The place was packed, more players than last time, with the same mix of serious faces and casual chatter. But Lucas and I weren't just opponents anymore. We were partners, which changed everything. Before the matches started, we sat side by side, decks shuffled and ready. Lucas nudged me lightly. "Ready to see if our chemistry translates to the table?" I laughed. "As ready as I'll ever be. Just don't let me drag you down." He shook his head. "No chance. We're in this together." The first few rounds were rough. We tripped over miscommunications, sometimes going for the same cards or misreading each other's moves. But with every mistake, there was that quiet chuckle from Lucas, or a reassuring smile that kept me from spiraling into panic. It wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about figuring us out like a new game we were learning to play together. After one particularly close match, Lucas leaned back and wiped his forehead. "You know, you're actually pretty good at this." I wasn't sure at first. I grinned, feeling a little more confident than I expected. "Thanks. You're not so bad yourself." He caught my eye and held my gaze a moment longer than usual. "Maybe we should do this more often, not just tournaments." My heart did that stupid little flip again. "Yeah? Like, what do you have in mind?" Lucas shrugged playfully. "Dinner after the next one? Or maybe something less competitive." I could feel the warmth creeping up my neck. "I'd like that." We kept going, the rounds blurring into one another. But the connection between us got clearer with every hand played and every shared laugh. At one point, during a break, Lucas caught me off guard by reaching over and brushing a stray hair behind my ear. A small gesture, but one that sent a jolt right through me. "Didn't realize you had a soft spot for game day rituals," I teased. He smirked. "Guess I liked the details." By the time the tournament wrapped up, we hadn't won, but it didn't matter. Packing up our cards, Lucas slipped his hand into mine, and I didn't pull away. Instead, I squeezed it gently, feeling a kind of quiet joy that I hadn't known I was missing. Afterward, we went for that dinner he mentioned, a small, cozy spot not far from the comic shop. We talked about everything and nothing, the easy flow between us making time feel like it was slowing down just for us. When the waiter dropped the check, Lucas reached across the table and said, "Let me." I opened my mouth to protest, but he cut me off with a wink. "I insist." Outside, the city lights flickered around us, and Lucas took my hand again. "So what now? More tournaments? More dinners?" I smiled, feeling like I was finally stepping into something real. "Definitely both." As we walked together into the night, I realized that sometimes the best games don't happen at the table. They happen when you take a chance on someone unexpected. And with Lucas, I was ready to play for keeps. After that dinner, things between Lucas and me started to settle into a rhythm that was both exciting and surprisingly comfortable. We texted almost every day, swapping game tips, sharing random memes, and occasionally flirting in a way that made me grin like an idiot at my phone. It was new territory for me, getting to know someone this well, this quickly, and honestly, it was a little scary, but scary in a good way. One evening, about a week after the doubles tournament, Lucas invited me over to his place to test out some new strategies. When I arrived, I was hit with the faint scent of coffee and incense, and the place looked like the perfect mix of creative chaos and cozy. Sketches and posters lined the walls, and there was an impressive collection of board games stacked in the corner. He greeted me with that same easy smile and a casual hug that somehow felt like more than just friendly. "Glad you could make it," he said. I followed him to the living room, where a table was set up with cards and snacks. We dove right into practice, talking strategy and trying out new moves, but it quickly turned into a mix of laughing over silly mistakes and teasing each other about our game faces. At one point, Lucas caught me staring a little too long, and he just grinned. "Thinking about your next move or just admiring me?" he joked. Caught off guard, I chuckled. Maybe a bit of both. The night stretched on, and the line between friendly competition and something else started to blur. We found ourselves sitting closer than before, the space between us charged with a kind of quiet anticipation. When Lucas reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear, I didn't pull back. His eyes searched mine, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he leaned in slowly, and I met him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but it quickly deepened into something I hadn't been prepared for. Warm, electric, and completely overwhelming. When we finally pulled apart, Lucas rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "I've been wanting to do that since the tournament." I smiled, heart pounding. Me too. After that night, things felt different between us. Not like we'd crossed some invisible line, but like we'd finally acknowledged what was already there. We started spending more time together outside of tournaments and game nights, going for walks, trying out new coffee shops, watching movies that neither of us had seen before. One lazy Sunday, we found ourselves sprawled on the couch at his place, talking about everything from our childhoods to what we wanted out of life. Lucas shared stories about growing up in a small town and how moving to the city had been both terrifying and liberating. I talked about my own struggles with being more open, how I had always been guarded, especially when it came to dating. He listened without judgment, and when I finished, he reached for my hand. "I'm really glad you trusted me enough to share that." "Me too," I said quietly, squeezing his hand. As weeks turned into months, our relationship grew in ways I hadn't imagined possible. We celebrated small victories, supported each other through rough patches, and built this little world that felt safe and real. Lucas wasn't just my teammate or my opponent anymore. He was the person I wanted to come home to. There were moments of doubt, sure. Times when I wondered if I was moving too fast, or if he felt the same way. But every time I looked at him, whether we were plotting strategies over a game or just sitting in comfortable silence, it was clear this was something worth fighting for. One night, after another tournament where we'd come close but didn't quite win, we sat on his balcony, the city lights stretching out below us. Lucas wrapped an arm around my shoulders and rested his chin on my head. "You know," he said softly, "no matter what happens in the game, I'm already winning." I laughed, leaning into him. "Yeah? How's that?" "Because I've got you," he said. "And that's the best prize I could ask for." In that moment, with the cool night air and the warmth of his presence, I realized that sometimes the real game isn't about cards or competition. It's about finding someone who plays with your heart as honestly as you play with theirs. And with Lucas, I was all in. A few days after that balcony moment, I found myself standing outside Lucas's apartment, feeling that weird mix of excitement and nervousness you get before something important. But nothing this felt important in a bad way. More like it mattered. Not just because of what we'd started, but because I wanted to take it further, to see if this, us, could really hold up beyond the tournament tables and late-night chats. Lucas opened the door before I could even knock, flashing that grin like he'd been waiting all day for me. "Hey," he said, stepping aside. "Come in." Inside, the place was cozy as usual, the soft glow of string lights casting warm shadows. He led me to the couch, and I noticed a small wrapped box sitting on the coffee table. I raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" I asked, sitting down. Lucas shrugged, a little sheepish. "I know it's kind of early, but I wanted to give you something. You're kind of my favorite player." I laughed, shaking my head. "Is that your way of saying I owe you a rematch?" "Maybe," he said, grinning. "But seriously, open it." I peeled the wrapping off to find a deck of custom playing cards, the design sleek and modern with hints of art that looked like Lucas's own work. On the back, in small, elegant script, it said, "For Jake, because every great game needs a great partner." I looked up at him, the warmth in my chest spreading. "Lucas, this is amazing. He shrugged again, but his cheeks flushed a little. I figured it was time to stop just flirting and start making memories. The evening slipped into easy conversation, music playing softly in the background as we sipped wine and talked about everything from our favorite artists to what we wanted from the future. There was a calmness with Lucas I hadn't known before, like I could be completely myself without worrying about judgment or pretending. At one point, he reached over and took my hand, fingers intertwining naturally. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, "about what comes next. Not just tournaments or dinners, but us. I don't want this to be just a summer thing." I squeezed his hand, feeling a lump in my throat. "Me neither. I want to see where this goes, no matter how long it takes." He smiled, and then out of nowhere, pulled me closer. "Good. Because I'm all in, Jake." That night, as we lay tangled together, I realized that love, at least the kind Lucas and I were building, wasn't about fireworks or grand declarations. It was about the small moments, the quiet promises, and the trust that grows when two people decide to play the long game. Over the next few weeks, we settled into a kind of happy routine, balancing work, games, and the growing connection between us. We kept showing up for each other, whether that meant late-night texts when one of us had a rough day, or spontaneous visits to grab coffee on a lazy afternoon. One Saturday, Lucas surprised me again with tickets to a local art exhibit. He knew I loved seeing new creative work, and this was his way of sharing a piece of his world with me. Walking through the gallery, hand in hand, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't realized I was missing. Afterward, we grabbed dinner at a little diner nearby, and as we sat across from each other, Lucas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notebook. "I've been working on some designs," he said, flipping it open to show sketches of cards, characters, and game boards. "I want to create something new, something we could play together." I studied the drawings, impressed. "Lucas, this is incredible. You should totally do it." He looked up, eyes bright. "I want to. With you. Maybe we could build it together? I mean, if you're down for a new kind of game." I grinned, feeling my heart swell. "Count me in." That night, we stayed up late, brainstorming ideas and dreaming about possibilities. It wasn't just about the game anymore. It was about building something lasting, together. Of course, it wasn't always perfect. There were moments when I doubted myself, or when Lucas got frustrated with work stress. But every time, we found our way back to each other, stronger and more sure. One evening, months after that first tournament, I found myself back at the comic shop. Not as a nervous newcomer, but as someone who had found more than just a game in that room. I was there to cheer on Lucas and a few friends in a new tournament, watching from the sidelines with a smile that wouldn't quit. After his match, Lucas spotted me and jogged over, wiping sweat from his brow. "Hey, partner," he said, grinning. "Hey," I replied, folding my arms smugly. "Ready for the next game?" He laughed, eyes shining with that same spark that had pulled me in from the start. "Always. But tonight, I'm more interested in the after party." I leaned in, matching his grin. "Sounds like a plan." Walking out into the crisp night air with Lucas by my side, I thought about how far we'd come. From hesitant glances over a game table to this, something real, something worth fighting for. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see what the next round would bring. After that night at the comic shop, things between Lucas and me started getting a little more serious. Not in a let's move in together tomorrow kind of way, but in the way that every small moment began to feel like a thread weaving us closer. A shared joke, an unplanned visit, even arguing over who forgot to buy milk. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, messy and comfortable. One evening, about a month after that tournament, Lucas invited me over for dinner. I wasn't sure what to expect. Sometimes his invitations were casual hangouts, other times, surprise game marathons. But when I stepped inside, I was greeted by the smell of something delicious, simmering in the kitchen and soft music playing from speakers in the living room. Lucas appeared from the kitchen with a towel slung over his shoulder, grinning like he'd just won a match. "Thought I'd try my hand at cooking tonight. Hope you're hungry." I laughed. "Hungry and impressed. You're full of surprises." We sat down to eat, and between bites, Lucas kept stealing glances at me. There was something in his eyes, nervous but hopeful, that made my heart thump a little harder. "So," he began, setting down his fork, I've been thinking about us, about how great this whole thing has been, but I want to make sure we're on the same page. I nodded, suddenly aware of how much I wanted him to say what I was already feeling. Yeah? What page is that? He reached across the table, taking my hand gently. That I'm serious about this, Jake. About you. I don't want to just be your game partner or your weekend distraction. I want to be someone you can count on. The warmth in his voice hit me harder than any victory in a tournament ever could. I squeezed his hand back. I'm serious too. I've never felt this way before. It's scary, but good scary. Lucas smiled, eyes shining. Good scary is the best kind. After dinner, we settled on the couch, close enough that our knees touched. We talked for hours about fears, dreams, the little things that made us who we are. It was the kind of conversation that makes you feel like you're building something real, brick by brick. A few weeks later, Lucas invited me to help with his new game project. His apartment was strewn with sketches, notes, and prototypes. We spent the afternoon brainstorming, testing ideas, and laughing over ridiculous concepts that would never make it past the first round. At one point, he looked up from his notebook and said, creating this game with you feels different. Like it's not just about winning, but about making something we both care about. I nodded, feeling the same way. Yeah. It's like every move we make together counts, both in the game and outside of it. That night, as I walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a game worth playing for the rest of my life. Of course, life wasn't just tournaments and romantic dinners. Work stress crept in, and sometimes our schedules clashed. There were moments of frustration, arguments over misunderstandings or bad days that left one of us distant. But each time, we found our way back, talking through the issues, reminding each other why we were in this together. One particularly rough week, I was feeling overwhelmed, juggling deadlines and a headache that wouldn't quit. Lucas showed up at my door with takeout and a goofy grin. Thought you could use an unofficial game break. We spent the evening on my couch, playing card games and watching dumb movies until I forgot about the stress. It was that simple kindness that made me realize how deeply I cared for him. As the months passed, we kept growing, learning each other's quirks and habits, supporting dreams and fears. We weren't perfect, and our story wasn't a fairy tale, but it was ours. And every shared smile, every quiet moment, every playful tease was another move towards something real. Last weekend, we did something neither of us expected. We signed up for a bigger tournament together, a regional event that would bring tougher competition and more pressure. But instead of nerves, I felt excitement, because I wasn't going in alone. I had Lucas by my side. On the drive there, he reached over and squeezed my hand. Ready to show them what we're made of? I smiled, squeezing back. With you? Always. As we stepped into the crowded hall filled with players and spectators, the familiar buzz of anticipation surrounded us. But this time, it felt different. Because no matter what happened in the games ahead, I already knew I'd won something far more valuable. Sometimes love, like a great game, is about taking risks, making moves you're not sure about, and trusting the person across the table to catch you when you fall. And with Lucas, I was ready to play for keeps. The regional tournament was everything we'd hoped it would be. Intense, challenging, and full of those small moments that made all the practice and nerves worth it. Lucas and I played as a team, not just relying on strategy, but on the trust we'd built over months. We didn't win first place, but we made it farther than either of us expected, and more importantly, we did it together. After the final match, exhausted but exhilarated, we sat outside the venue, the evening air crisp and calm. Lucas pulled me close, resting his head on my shoulder, and I felt that quiet, steady warmth between us, the kind that comes from knowing you're with someone who sees you, really sees you. I'm proud of us, he said softly. I smiled, squeezing his hand. Me too. This, us, it's more than I ever thought I'd find at a game tournament. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine with that familiar spark. So what's next? I thought about it, the way our journey had unfolded, from nervous opponents to partners in games and in life. More tournaments, sure. But also just more of this. The everyday stuff, figuring it out together. Lucas grinned, that easy confidence I'd come to love. Sounds pretty perfect. In that moment, surrounded by the fading sounds of the city and the quiet buzz of our shared excitement, I realized something important. Love isn't about flashy declarations or perfect timing. It's about the moments in between. The laughter, the steady support, the willingness to play the long game with someone who makes you want to be better. Walking hand in hand toward whatever came next, I felt grateful. Grateful for that first game, for Lucas's unexpected flirtation between rounds, and for the way life had surprised me by turning a simple tournament into the best story I'd ever tell. Because sometimes winning isn't about the trophy. It's about finding the person who makes every move worthwhile, and I had found that in him.